Hello, everybody. Today I have Amanda with me from Pretty Effin' Spooky on Instagram. She is a paranormal investigator, and I believe I've only ever spoken to one other paranormal investigator here on this channel. So it'll be cool to have a different perspective and, different experiences. So, Amanda, can you tell me where this all started, when you got interested in it? Did something happen and you dove into this? Like, what's the origin story of you becoming kind of interested and starting to do all this investigation on the spooky stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I first started experiencing the paranormal when I was about 7 years old. I lived in Montana with my grandma and my mom, and we lived in a haunted duplex. And I was only 7 years old, so I wasn't predisposed to paranormal media or anything like that quite yet. And I was also raised in the church. I was raised Baptist. So there wasn't really any room for the paranormal in the framework of my religion or my upbringing. However, I was experiencing it anyway. And so it started when I was 7 and continued following me well beyond that haunted duplex into my teens. And then when I was 18, I decided to join a ghost hunting team. And this was like 2008 when I was 18. So I met them through MySpace, I think, or like the very early days of Facebook.
Oh, girl, MySpace.
Yeah. So it was like very grassroots, like not what it is today. I really had to search for a team to join. And luckily I found one that was very cool. There was like, I don't know, over 10 of us. And my whole goal was to kind of understand why I was experiencing the paranormal, what it
Mm.
meant, and also sort of trying to substantiate my personal experiences so that I could believe myself more because I had kind of created this doubt that anything that I was believing in was real to begin with because I had some trauma growing up and stuff like that. So I just needed to make sense of it. So I joined this group. Then I lived my 20s where I didn't want to ghost hunt. I just wanted to party and be 20 something years old. And then in 2019 is when I started my blog, Pretty Effin' Spooky, and I've been solo investigating ever since.
Oh, so you're a solo investigator now. You don't have a team anymore?
I do not have a team. No, I actually tried to find a team in my like mid 20s in where I live now is Spokane, Washington. It's the east side of Washington
Oh,
State.
yeah, I know Spokane.
Cool. Not many people do. I'm surprised you do.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm surprised. I don't maybe.
No, people only know like we're kind of weird, so people only know like weird, crazy shit about Spokane. But it's not bad. I love Washington State, but I tried to find a team to join because I had really loved the team aspect, and I loved kind of my first team was very rooted in early paranormal media, which would have been like ghost hunters, where they
Mhm.
were using scientific equipment to find proof of the paranormal. And that's where I got my start. And I wanted to do that again. And so I tried to join a team, but no one ever got back to me.
Oh.
like just point blank, no one ever replied back. And I tried for a while and then I just was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it alone. And now I travel and I investigate with other people that I meet online. And so I'm not only investigating by myself, but I don't have a team at all.
Mm. Do you have like pros and cons about working solo and with a team? Do you prefer one or the other, or is there like just kind of there's good things about both and bad things about both?
Yeah, definitely there are benefits to both. I think actually, if you can find like a team of maybe 3 people total would be kind of the sweet spot. I do actually think it's better with other people. It's kind of like this is a controversial comparison, but it's sort of like using the Ouija board. Like you're technically supposed to do it with other people because the theory is that I'm not like a Ouija board like lover and I think that they're, super awesome, but you're supposed to use people because the energy together creates more activity.
Mhm.
I kind of think that that applies to paranormal investigating. I think when you're alone, you can definitely experience activity still. Of course, we all have, I'm sure, if you're watching this, um, but if you're investigating it and you're trying to, um, you know, write it down and research it and kind of dig deeper into it, I do think the help of a couple of people is maybe more beneficial for a lot of reasons. But when you're alone, I mean, you get to know that you're alone experiencing paranormal activity and that there's no one else creating the activity. That's nice. There's not five other people in the building where you can explain things away. I just investigated the underground tunnels in Eureka, Nevada recently, and I was completely alone and heard some talking. And I was like, well, I know that that's not my team or not other people. It's just me in here. So there's benefits to both, but I do like investigating with other people.
That makes sense. I mean, I personally like working alone, I mean, occult wise, but there are a lot of moments that I feel like I have experiences that I'm like, that was really cool. But then because nobody was around to experience it with me, I'm kind of like, did it happen? Or, like, what am I just kind of looking into this? And so when I do have people around me doing rituals or something with me, and then something else happens, and both of us feel the same or experience the same thing, see the same thing, it's almost like a confirmation of like, okay, so you saw it too, right? Like it's a little more um physical or like not physical.
Tangible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tangible. That's the word. Um,
Yeah, I would agree. I like that you mentioned like practicing, or like if you think about it in terms of like ritual and like really, really detailed or like extravagant ritual oftentimes requires like a scribe as well, like somebody else to be able
true.
to like write down what is happening. And I kind of relate paranormal investigating to that. It's like you can absolutely, and at times maybe should do it alone, but there is a lot of benefit to having at least one other person, if not two, to just help with the process. But like, I don't know. I've done it alone for so long too that like I do really value paranormal investigating by myself, because then it does become more of like a spiritual experience rather than just ghost hunting.
True. I know you have some tools that I've seen you use on your Instagram. Do you have like a favorite one? Do you have a favorite one that's lasted you forever, or do you have one that you just kind of cycle through? How do you even choose tools? I just gave you like 8 questions. I'm sorry. So
That's okay.
so yeah, if you want to pick or choose which one you want to start with and just delve in.
Yeah, equipment as a whole. I lately online I've been using a tool called the Ovilus, and the Ovilus first came out a long time ago, and then they stopped producing this piece of equipment, and so it became like very sought after, and it was very hard to get a hold of. Well, the creator of the Ovilus made a new one recently. It's called the Ovilus 5, and it's for sale on GoStop and like very expensive. But I wanted it, and I had wanted it for like 15 years, and I got it, and I've been using it a lot online, partially because I spent a lot of money on it and I was very excited about it, but also because it's a word bank. There's lots of features to it, but primarily it's used as a word bank, and it literally just says words when it's triggered potentially by a spirit, and that's really easy for an audience, I think, to understand and to like be a part of, is when something is literally saying like words that you can understand with your ear, versus like a spirit box, which is a radio that's scanning through frequencies at an accelerated rate, so it creates that and you kind of have to develop an ear for it. That can be hard when sharing with an audience. So uh there's also the conversation about equipment comes up, the topic of like what I do when I'm sharing with people versus what I do when I'm alone and I don't need to be presenting it to people for them to consume. And so the Ovilus I love, but it's definitely I'm utilizing it as a way to easily communicate with the people that I want to show that this paranormal activity is happening. And I do think it comes up with some very interesting results a lot of the time. But the spirit box is actually my favorite tool to use, I would say, because that is part of also what's called the Estes method. I'm sure you've heard of that. Have you heard of? Yeah, I figured. The Estes method with the sensory isolation techniques, and I feel like that tool, I really love the blending that does of like entering you into trance and then also using this piece of ghost hunting tech. I just think it creates a really like valuable, meaningful experience. So that would probably be like my favorite piece of equipment. But honestly, these days, in the last couple of years, I've moved away from using a lot of the equipment that I have. Like now, if I'm going on an investigation, I might pull out like two pieces of equipment. Maybe there's a bell that just came out called the dead bell, and that's kind of fun. Spirits can ring a bell, and that's a really cool way for you to kind of tell like where something is, or you can use like a yes and no sort of system, or maybe we'll use something with lights that kind of show us where a spirit might potentially be. But most of the time I'm using more like the tools that I use in my spiritual practice. So I'm using like tarot, or occasionally like a pendulum or dice or whatever. Like I'm trying to incorporate more of like the tools that I have around me, drawing, trance again. And so that's kind of replaced the equipment for a lot of my investigations. But I'm still like, my upbringing is traditional ghost hunting, and that's still very much there. And I have like a pile of equipment behind me that I'm very grateful to have access to. But it really boils down to like the obelisk and the spirit boxer. It's primarily the tools that I'm using.
Yeah, I think that's how I found you. And I like binged a bunch of your reels. Was you just were going through a bunch of jewelry, and
Mm-hmm.
like talking. I don't think it was a spirit. Was it the spirit box at the time?
It
Or
was the obelisk.
okay, yeah, because it was just like pointing out words and stuff. And I thought that was so fun because, and also I think you were kind of taking it in such a way that I feel like there's either one end of the spectrum or the other. There's like people that are like, this isn't real, but like, let's see what we get. Or there's people who are like, everything that comes out here is totally real. And it's like all a sign that, spirits totally exist. And like, I'm somewhere in the middle. So I like it when I find other people in the middle. Confirmation bias, what can I say? But I feel like you approached it kind of in the middle there where you were like, I don't know if this is going to be a thing, but like, yeah, why not? Let's see. And like we'll keep an open mind, but we're also not gonna like cling to it as evidence. Um,
Yeah.
and so like how did you start doing that with the jewelry? Was that just like something that you bought and was like, oh, let's try this? Or did you
Yeah. That's a great
intentionally?
That's a great question. And I loved making those videos. I wish I could replicate it, but I think that's the magic of like social media, and also the magic of paranormal investigating is I can't replicate that. It was just like the perfect opportunity. I found this jewelry jar, this mystery jewelry jar, which are going viral on like TikTok. So I had seen videos of it, and like from a consumer point of view, I was just like, "Ooh, fun! I want like vintage jewelry in a jar, and I want it to be a mystery. That sounds so fun." And then I finally found one though that I think in the video I explained, I'm like, I had a vibe to it, and it did. It was like I just was like, there's some good pieces in here. It's vintage. And I just like got really excited about it and was really pulled to it. I actually left the thrift store and then came back and got it because I was like, no, like I was like, maybe I'm thinking too much into it, or like want it to be true. But I went back for it and I got it. And then um I have a lot of haunted or potentially haunted antiques here, like even just behind me you can see some of the like weird stuff that I have. And I love playing with the idea of haunted objects in general. Like I think technically every single thing that a living human touches could hold on to that energy, and it could persist and be accessed later on. I think that I kind of believe that we need to reframe our thoughts around haunted objects, that they must all be this like cursed, severely haunted, soul has entered an object kind of thing. But it's like, I just think that it's like a tether, like how a lot of psychic mediums can use objects to kind of, help them connect to energy. I think that these objects can help us do that, but in a more traditional ghost hunting sense. So I wanted to try that out with the jewelry jar, and it ended up being successful. There was a couple I was able to relinquish a lot of the jewelry. Some of it went back to the thrift, some of it I sold to followers, and then some of it, the most active pieces, I kept. But it was really interesting. And I do also agree with you. I'm very much in the middle of like, I I think because I come from being so skeptical early on, I've struggled trusting myself for a long time, especially with my experiences. Like I said, I had a traumatic upbringing, and it kind of created, later on, I started to examine it and be like, am I actually just trying to escape reality? And I'm creating these false scenarios in my head, to this fantasy to make myself feel better. Like I started really delving into that in my 20s. And on one hand, it hurt. It was like hurtful because I couldn't explore the paranormal or like even a spiritual practice in the way I luckily have gotten to now. But on the other hand, it created this ability for me to be able to step back and look at things more with a different lens and not immediately think that everything is paranormal right away. And I think that's super valuable because, especially with the way that paranormal short form media has taken off, and there's a sensationalism happening that if we want the field to move forward and to want to actually understand it, especially on like a philosophical level, we need to be able to have some good discernment. And so anyway, that I'm glad you recognize that. Like I try my hardest to put that into the work that I put out there online. And just hope and cross my fingers that it like gets across in like a minute and a half video sometimes, you know. But yeah, the jewelry jar series was like really, really eye-opening for me too, that like if I just sit down with an intent and reach out, granted, maybe I wasn't reaching out to somebody who actually wore a piece of that jewelry. Maybe it's like a Ouija board and I was just reaching out into the ether and like pulling out anything. Either way, it's extremely fascinating. It is in by nature paranormal, you know? So
Yeah, so you mentioned how it's kind you feel like it's kind of like anything anybody touches that can kind of create a tether. I'm really curious what your view or what your take on is like on spirits in general. Do you believe that everybody who's ever died is still somehow here? Do you think it's like a full conscious? Do you think there's different levels? Like what kind of thing do you believe in? Also, I'm going to close this because the sun is right in my face. But what I'm just curious about like kind of what you view that. Oh my God, that's so much better. I don't look like I'm wearing a crazy filter anymore. Um, yeah, because I think it just depends for me because that's still something that like I don't really know. I don't have totally figured out, at least personally. And I don't believe that everybody who ever has died is still here. I don't really think that there is such a thing as like moving on to the next realm. I think, things get recycled and stuff, but in my belief, it's almost like people or anything that dies, maybe parts of it or a big part of it can get recycled and then one bit stays, or like I think it just depends, and I don't really feel like there's a system. I think it's just kind of random within that. But I'm curious what you think because I talk to a lot of practitioners and obviously they all have similar things regarding something within their practice. So you as a practitioner and as an investigator, I'd really like to know what your take is on that.
my belief on that is very similar to yours. And excuse my ignorance, because I've been thinking lately as my belief and views have changed that I actually need to dig into different theosophy and like understand if there's already like something out there that can explain what I'm trying to say. Like if there's a word for it, I don't know it. I'm sorry, but um I I have come to believe that I look at it like a river of like energy kind of, and that we kind of just get dispersed into it and then can reconstitute at times, which is the only way that I can explain ghost hunting working, is that we reach out to talk to a spirit. And I don't think that that spirit exists on this plane all the time and is somehow, I don't know, tortured or like stuck or whatever. I don't believe that personally at all. I believe that it kind of disperses out there, and then when we call on it, sometimes it can reconstitute and can speak to us when we need it to. However, that also requires a huge amount of living energy to be able to do that. So when I am ghost hunting, I oftentimes am looking at us communicating with these spirits as really us communicating with ourselves and with the living still. And even like myself, like I've explored a lot of I've done a lot of experiments and like explored theories on like, can I talk to my higher self with ghost hunting equipment? Can I talk to my trauma or to specific emotions as if they are entities in themselves? I really play a lot with like trying to stretch and widen my view on what any of this means, because at the end of the day, I don't know either. And I am very passionate about making it okay to not know in the paranormal field, because there's so much, especially in my field with the paranormal, there's so much emphasis on coming to a conclusion or coming up with irrefutable proof, or like being the authority on something, especially when it comes to conservative Christian views and the way that they approach ghost hunting, in that they need to like cross a spirit on, and like, or that there's a demon or whatever. Like you get into just all sorts of things are happening in the paranormal community, as everywhere, but like just really in your face in this community. And I want to make it more acceptable to just be like, I don't know. And that is why I'm exploring it, is because I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand better what is going on. But I've come to the conclusion, at least, that no, I don't believe that everyone who dies becomes a spirit. I don't believe that spirits are stuck ever. I refuse to believe that we lose our autonomy after dying and going and becoming energy, or like whatever we become after we die, whatever happens. I don't like to think that, like, if we haven't been, I don't know, reincarnated or something, if we haven't been sent on some other journey, I would like to think that we still hold some autonomy and can like act on our own will and accord. So that's like, I guess, the basis of it. I don't have like a fully articulated belief system now, but
I mean, neither
yeah.
do I. It's, yeah, like I think it's always changing with the more or less information that I have, you know. But I think kind of that's kind of the fun part, because if we had it all figured out, it wouldn't be as alluring or as interesting, in my opinion. Um, and so I think the whimsy of it is
Mm-hmm.
kind of a big piece of it for me. So, you know, like I'm okay with not having it figured out, despite the fact that it also does frustrate me, because then that, you know, helps me know if I am communicating or who I'm communicating with. Um, but yeah, and I really liked, oh, you said something. I really liked that you said that it's kind of like all this energy is just like in this river, and then as we call upon it, it comes
Re-
back together.
yeah, like
Yeah,
reconstitutes, like
yeah,
almost like solidifies sometimes. That's the best way that honestly has just come about being on so many investigations, that I'm like, well, there are instances where I believe that we are talking to a spirit of someone from the past. How
yeah.
can that happen? I think that it's just our willpower
Mhm.
calling upon it and it coming forward. Also, similar to sort of like in that sense, I guess I'm like working through this as I'm talking. I'm like, huh,
Great.
well, it's like, because then I'm like, well, can two people call on the same spirit at the same time, like a deity? And maybe, I don't know, like that's interesting to think about too, because can it reconstitute and communicate like anywhere at any time overlapping? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm
The,
also curious too, because like us as practitioners, I mean, my belief and the way that I've learned it from my mentors is that really magic is people manipulating energy, right? That's if you really want to boil it down to the very, very basis, it's just us manipulating energy. So that's why I think science is definitely a form of magic. I think that you know, drinking something herbal or even cooking or like just changing, like melting ice into water, like that is a form of magic, in my opinion. Is it exciting? Probably not, but like it's a form of magic. And so when you said that it kind of reaccumulates into one place, that could very well be us almost doing magic in order to like grab that energy and kind of stick it back together. And maybe that's why they feel so wispy, of like they're not these, you know, incredibly strong entities. It's just these bits that we've grabbed and like kind of suctioned back together and is like,
yeah,
tell me things. And they're like,
yeah,
you know, they're kind of like, I have a fraction of my memory and I don't know where I am. Like, I feel like
yeah.
that might be it as
Yeah,
well. I
yeah.
don't know.
Well, and it's like alchemy at that point too, that we're
Yeah.
like, and this is, also where I've argued that like paranormal investigating, even in its rawest form, does need to introduce some form of ritual to the act of paranormal investigating, because I believe that it helps make that process of like bringing in the energy, it helps make it more successful, I think, versus just running into a place and yelling at like a monkey to dance kind of thing,
Gosh.
you know?
Do
Um,
you, sorry, go ahead.
no, it's okay. I don't know.
Oh, okay. I was gonna ask if you mainly focus on spirits of the dead, or if you also try to communicate with maybe spirits who were never human, or do you even believe in spirits who were never human? Like, I'm curious on that too.
Yeah, I definitely do believe in, I believe in everything. I'll just blanket term it. I believe in the potential for everything to exist. I'm even down, the maybe Sasquatch is a ghost, like like I'm open. I think I can't exist in this space without
Yeah,
um
that's fair.
having a wide set of beliefs. But um I actually focus less on spirits of the non-living spirits, and I focus more again on speaking to the living, but the what we project outward. Like I said, I investigate emotion, I investigate egregores, things like that. I'm more interested in that, though I do often contact spirits of non-living. I have explored the idea of contacting nature spirits. I did a lot of work out on the Olympic Peninsula for a documentary that took like 3 years to film. We were talking specifically to the Lady of the Lake of Lake Crescent, and which was supposed to be a traditional ghost. But the experience out there, if anyone knows anything about the Olympic Peninsula, it is like full of all sorts of lore and legend and paranormal phenomena. It's known for UFOs. Sasquatch it's hugely important to the indigenous community. And being out there in the forests of the Olympic National Forest really opened my eyes to the idea that I was maybe sometimes not talking to spirits that were once human and had passed on, but actually was interacting with like the forest or things that I didn't understand. And I always say like my time there always felt like I was a visitor, and that that land allowed me to be there, but only for a brief time, because it wasn't my land to be on. So short answer is yes. I speak to all types of spirits, but when I'm traditionally paranormal investigating, I'm often just going with the intent of talking to the spirits that everyone else has talked to. Like say I go to a famous location, I'm gonna be down with talking to, the spirit of Timmy, who like runs down the hall, even though I don't necessarily think it's Timmy. I don't know why a boy would be running in, a prison. Like it doesn't make any sense. But then I also just I get really interested in talking to the living people that I'm with, and what they're going through and how they're interacting and why it's manifesting the way that it is for them.
Okay. I have so many things that just came up that I'm like, don't forget, because I wasn't taking notes. But first of all, the I can't remember what you said. I know that there was a name for the method. It's the spirit box with the immersion. What is it? The which method?
The Estes method.
Festus method. I have always wanted to do that. So if I'm ever in Washington, could I hit you up and could we do that?
Absolutely.
Hell
Yes,
yeah.
you need to do it. You would do so well at
I would
it.
love to. I really
Yeah.
want to, but like A, I don't have a spirit box. B, I don't really have anyone else that would be super down to do that. And like I don't think I'm not a type A person, but I feel like again, when it comes to something ritualistic, like there's a reason there's steps, right? Like, and you want to do the things right. I don't want it to be this casual, like, oh, we're doing this spooky thing. Like I do want to like actually be in it and do it. So yes, I will probably hit you up because I go to Washington often for some reason. So, and
Yes.
then there was a post that you made a while ago that I wanted to ask you about. Um, so this is going to be kind of my second to last question because we're running up on time here, but there's let me see if I can find it really quick. You had, is this it? Okay, here it is. You had all these different haunted locations and if they actually scared you or not. And it was all these different places, and some of them surprised me, like the St. Louis Cemetery too. You said yes. And like there was, I don't think that there was like, yeah, I don't think you had any like explanation as to why. But can you tell me like why some certain locations scared you, and then the Panama Hotel as well? Like that one especially was like all in caps and you were like, yes, that scared me. And I'm like, what happened? I want to know. So if you're comfortable with sharing those, I'd love to know.
Yeah. The Panama Hotel I'll speak to first. Typically what scares me is things that catch me off guard. I like control. I'm in Aries. That's not really, I should tell you
No,
though, my
tell me.
big three. Yeah.
I want to know
I was
your
like, I should
zodiac.
just tell you. I'm an Aries sun, Aquarius moon, Sagittarius rising, and a Libra midheaven. But anyway, so like I like control over my um like environment. So when I get scared, it's typically because it caught me off guard or it happened when I wasn't expecting it. So the Panama Hotel, I've stayed at a few times. It's a hotel in Seattle, known for its really important Japanese history. They have the only like standing Japanese bathhouse in their basement still, and they had a huge role to play in the Japanese community in early Seattle. So super, super cool hotel for a million reasons. But I was sleeping there and was woken up in the middle of the night to I felt the bed frame shaking, which could have been an earthquake technically, but when I was like shaken awake, I could hear two people speaking to each other and it felt right next to my ear, but it created this kind of weird sound effect that sounded like they were coming through like a 1940s radio. It was the most bizarre thing that I've had, like that I've experienced. And then since then, I've actually heard a couple more like disembodied voices that sound just like that. And I still don't know what exactly is going on there. I
Huh.
don't know why it's creating this like effect. Um, two mourning doves just flew up to this tree right here. Aw. But so anyway, that was like super scary. I also woke up in a sweat in the Panama Hotel. It was just extremely energetically like dense there, and I was trying to sleep and I wasn't investigating, so it scared me. And it's active every time I've been, so that one is interesting, and I also don't understand it, so things I don't understand naturally scare me. Duh, everyone. It says everyone, but and then like the cemeteries are interesting because for a while I was of the belief that cemeteries were not haunted and could not be haunted and didn't make sense to be haunted, because I was looking at it from the point of view of like why would we be able to call in spirits just based on the presence of their like bones, their dust? Like why I was like, I don't like the idea that we would even care about our earthly form after we're gone. But then like I said, my belief system changed entirely and I started looking at the way that we communicate with things differently, and then I was like, well, of course we'd be able to communicate with energy in a cemetery, but it's probably a lot of living energy and a lot of grief and mourning happening. And it's just very, again, energetically dense. And if I can remember correctly, the St. Louis cemetery, no, St. Louis number two, I think would be the one that's by the highway in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And that one created this, again, a feeling of I'm a visitor here. And I respect that and I recognize it when it happens, but it's just like walking around in somewhere that I was like, this is not necessarily my place to be. And I was like, it's not, these spirits don't have whatever is happening here. Cause I did feel like that was, even New Orleans is so magical and so complex. And I was like, whatever is happening here, um, I'm unfamiliar with. And I could feel it. It felt like it was like just on the other side of a veil, so to speak. But every time I would like turn a corner, I felt like somebody was gonna be standing right there. And then I just ended up leaving because I was like, this isn't. I was like, this isn't my place to be. Like I visited it, I respected it, but then I was like, and and I'll move on. And I found myself in a lot of situations where like I just don't even end up investigating because I feel that feeling.
Mm.
Because I just think sometimes too, it's just not my business. You know what I mean? Like people's family history, or maybe their religious practice is different. Maybe that area was people were practicing hoodoo or voodoo, and I was stepping into sort of energetic space that just was it was not appropriate for me to be in. So yeah, that's just like a myriad of reasons why I could be scared in different locations. Some are more specific, like some are like, oh, a really scary thing happened, and some are just like, that was a place, yeah, that I just felt um,
Yeah.
like I didn't belong. Yeah.
I totally get that. I think, I mean, I've told this story time and time again, so I'm sure my audience is like, "Oh my God, we get it." But you know what? I'm going to tell it again. There's this cemetery that a friend and I really wanted to go to. I was trying to hit more cemeteries further outside of Denver because I've been to all the ones that are in Denver and near Denver and all that stuff. And there's actually not, there's a few, but there's like not a ton that are super exciting. But you know, Colorado, which is where I'm based in right now, is uh a big mining town or like big mi town, the whole state. It's a big mining state, and there's a lot of you know, like mining and a lot of like pioneer type of deal cemeteries and whatnot. So there's like smaller things. And there's this one cemetery, it was like 2.5-ish, 2 hours out of where I was living. And I asked my friend, hey, do you want to go? And she was like, yeah. So it's like, okay. So we get in the car and we drive the 2 and some odd hours all the way out, like super, super far out. And we get there, and it's this tiny little town that we pass through. And then you keep going a little bit, and we're like off to the side. It's mid-November, so it's fucking cold. There's snow everywhere. And we get out of the car, and I can see it's kind of more southern, so there's less trees. It's not really, it's like on the hilly side of the mountains. There's not really like mountains. So we're more southern. And so there's not a lot of like trees, but there is a tree line where the evergreens start growing. And so we get out, and there's like, you know, all this grassland, and then there's the tree line, and right behind the tree line is the cemetery. So maybe like, I don't know, 7 meters down, like up a small, small hill, you can kind of see the gate of the cemetery. And then if you turn to the right, there it is. And so we get out of the car, and we start to walk, and we make it maybe like 1.5 meters. And we just stop and like look at each other, and we're both like, we should go home. And then we just turned around and got back in the car. And like a year or two later, I brought it up to her, and I was like, do you remember this one cemetery? And she was, yes. Oh my God. And we started kind of talking about it. And I was like, it didn't feel like the cemetery itself was like telling us no. It felt like the trees, like the tree line that was covering it was like, you don't want to be here. You don't, there's no reason for you to be here. You just turn around and go home. And like, thankfully, both of us were like, okay, bye, you know. And I'm always gonna be curious, but I don't
Yeah.
think I'm ever gonna go back because the trees told me no, so I'm gonna listen.
Yeah. Well, and the trees see everything. And I've visited some haunted locations where my attention was immediately drawn to a tree. And I was like, what are you trying to tell me right now? And I think that is so a thing. So that makes sense. But yeah, it's interesting when that happens. And that those things scare me because I don't get
Yeah.
it. I don't understand it and I'm not able to explore it. But also then I later on I've just come to accept that just because I don't have a complete understanding of it doesn't mean it's any less real. It still exists,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, and so like I think th that's one of my experiences also that I think just definitely unsettled me. I think about it all the time, you know, because like just that feeling of like you should not be coming in here. Like there's things in there you don't need. And I'm like, okay. And you know, like I'll never know what that meant or why the trees were so um abrasive about that, but whatever. So
Yeah.
okay, so my last question to wrap up the public part is what do you have like a checklist type of thing of what you do or what you bring or what you kind of prepare for before you go in to do a solo investigation? And then also kind of like how do you choose that location?
Mm. Yeah. I've written some blogs about this on my website in more detail, but I do have a little bit of a ritual before I go on any investigation period. I have an altar. I have a whole spiritual practice, so I typically try to call on my ancestors in particular. They're my greatest like spiritual defense. And that a lot of people want to know often like how I defend myself from evil. I don't necessarily believe in good and evil. I think that that is kind of a construct that we've created nowadays. But you know, I defend myself from being too emotionally overwhelmed by leaning into my spiritual practice, and I always do something, either leave an offering or light a candle or whatever. It makes me feel in touch with them. I might pull some tarot too. I like to try to get a gauge on how the night is going to go emotionally. Not, I don't pull or try to research anything. Like, I try not to get too much information historically, but I just try to pull on like how the spirits are feeling, how I'm feeling, get a good gauge on it. And then how I choose it, locations. And then after that is typically how I'll choose equipment too. Like, it's all intuitive at this point. I'm just kind of, I
Mhm.
want to say I'm winging it, but it really, truly, it is like an intuitive thing. But and then I'll investigate practically anywhere, unless it has like, it's weird. These days I don't even choose so much as like a thread like leads me to something. Like, somebody will say something and then I'll look for a synchronicity, and then that'll kind of confirm it, and then I just kind of go. So it's all very intuitively led now. And I'll investigate anywhere aside from, you know, maybe problematic places. Like, I'm not particularly interested in like asylums, but like I'll investigate nearly anywhere.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Thanks for hanging out and let me pick in your brain. I'm gonna bring you over to Patreon. They have a bunch of questions for you. But otherwise, do you want to leave kind of like these are where to find me? Tell us where to find that documentary. I'll leave like your link tree and like all of your links and stuff in the description if people want to find you. But is there anything else that you want to like, let everybody know where to find you or how to contact or things like that?
Yeah, I'm at Pretty Evan Spooky on all platforms and prettyevanspooky.com. And I have a documentary called The Lady of the Lake coming out in December of this year uh, on like VOD streaming for you to rent. And then I also have a series coming out in the beginning of 2025 with Amy Bruni and Sarah Lemos. So keep an eye out for that. That should be on people's television. So
Thanks for watching. And if you want to see Amanda's kind of like Q&A style answering all of my Patreon questions, there's always exclusive videos of everybody that I interview here on this channel over my Patreon. But otherwise, as always, thank you so much for watching. Best of luck. Be kind to each other, and may your gods treat you as you've treated others. Bye.
There is no place I'd rather be than right here next to you. And I truly love to talk about your lovers, old and new.